I'm so pleased to introduce to you Eileen Scully, an author of a book called In the Company of Men, about to come out. The tagline, How Women Can Succeed in a World Built Without Men.
Without them.
Without them. Do you hate men?
I wish I could tell you how many times I get asked that question. It's actually quite the opposite. The book is about the spaces that were built largely by white straight men and how the rest of us have had to really work our way creatively into those spaces. They were not built with women in mind, and the book wants to tell stories about how it is that the rest of us can adapt some of those principles.
With what background did you come to write this book? Was it just a burning desire to do it for a long time? Give folks your background.
Sure. So I spent close to 20 years in technology research in a highly male-dominated field. I had a reasonable amount of success. I loved that job. The only thing that held me back was not having my college degree. It was less my gender and the fact that I didn't have the on-paper credentials. But I was fortunate to have worked around so many men and women who mentored me, took me on as an apprentice, and really helped me grow into a business that was fascinating, dynamic, and at times like riding a rocket ship.
When you set out to write this book, who did you seek out? And what stories did you tell?
So the first person who really sparked the theme of the book, which is women who have done remarkable things in male spaces, but they're also changing the rules from inside. They're changing that space to make that journey easier for other people to follow them. And the first person whose story I heard that really struck me is a woman named Laura Achman. She is an NFL sideline reporter, and she started losing assignments to younger and less experienced reporters. And Laura stopped and said, instead of quitting, instead of leaving this space that I love so much, that I've worked so hard to get to this place, let me make those younger women better. Let me bring them together. Let me be the mentor for them that I never had. And that, for me, was so powerful. So the rest of the stories in the book take that framework, a woman who's in a very male space who wants to change that space from within for other people.
Do you think that women can be their own worst enemies, though, many times, and don't help each other get to the next level?
I think that's probably more true of our generation and than this next generation. I think women now that have seen how hard it was for us and don't want to replicate the ways that we've made it harder for each other. I see a lot more cooperation and acceleration in the younger generation. I do a lot of work with younger women right now, and it's inspiring to me. They're so smart, they're so unstoppable, they're so tenacious.
Why did you want to write this book, and who is it for? Who's this book
Great question.
for?
Yeah, the book is for mostly women. I know women will read this book, they'll be drawn to the cover, they'll be drawn to the stories, but the book is really for everyone. The person who's writing my foreword, I don't want to give it away until the book comes out, but he's a prominent executive. He is a white heterosexual man who runs a major corporation. He's an advocate for women, and one of the reasons I wanted him to introduce this book is I need men to read this as well. I need men to understand that we're not complaining all the time, that we're not creating problems that don't exist. The book outlines the ways in which the laws in many states have been written to keep women from having equal pay in the workplace, from having the right opportunities to do the same things as men. As an example, we just read last week that Virgin Airlines isn't requiring their women to wear pants or makeup when they're flight attendants. That's crazy. To be a safety officer, which is really what flight attendants' primary job is, you need to wear pants. You can't do certain things in a skirt.
It's almost 2020.
Exactly. So these are the things that we take for granted in the world in which we live, but I want people to really sort of shift that way of thinking and say, why is this way? And can it be better? And can we change some of these superfluous rules so that it becomes easier for everyone to excel.
You talked about our generation. What types of things did you come up against that men maybe didn't realize how it sounded, or just were used to saying it, or we need to change the thinking a little bit? Give me some examples.
Right. I mean, the perfect example is my first corporate job. It harkens back to what we were just talking about with the flight attendants. The women in the office weren't allowed to wear pants. There was a guy who ran the company. It was a family-owned company, and women weren't allowed to wear pants. And this is in Connecticut. In the winter, in February, you had to go to work in a skirt. Things like that just you didn't fight it, but it just doesn't make sense in retrospect.
Were things said to you?
There is a story that I tell in the book about a very vile comment that was made to me offhand by someone that I worked with who was in a position of power, and he was around at the time other white men who were in that power structure in the organization, and it floored me. It came out of nowhere. I did nothing to deserve or earn this. I'm the biggest one to joke around with people about innocuous things, and I'll sometimes, give you a little dagger in the side. But this was really deeply personal and sexualized, and it crushed me for days.
In the book, you tell stories and you give hope to what can be in the future. What are some solutions that we can work on as women, as men? How do you wrap this all up?
Sure. So the back section of the book has what I think of as quick hits. Anybody can read through. I have about 50 tips for the ways anyone in any workforce or any life stage can implement to make not just the workplace, but life better for everyone around us. And they're as simple as opening doors for people, and I don't mean like when you're walking into Stop and Shop. I mean opening a door into a space where someone might not be as welcome. Looking for people to mentor that don't look like you, that didn't go to the school that you went to, that didn't grow up in the neighborhood that you grew up in. To as dramatic as planning events to accommodate people of all abilities. So making sure that there are doorways and entranceways that are wide enough for people that may not be fully able to walk through a space to accommodate.
Are you finding a new platform for yourself? Because as you go out and talk about this book, what do you think is going to happen?
I'm hopeful that I'll work my way out of a job. I hope that there's no demand for the work that I do on the side, which is consulting businesses around these topics. But I think there are more and more people who will either, I forget who made the quote recently, but you either see the light or you feel the burn. And there are a lot of potential employees, there are a lot of potential customers, and there are a lot of shareholders right now that are looking at women in the workplace and diversity in the workplace in new ways and demanding that from different organizations and different companies.
In the Me Too generation.
Completely.
Is this the first of many books, or was
I
this
hope so, yeah. I mean,
how long did it take you to write it?
It's probably about 2 years. I stopped for a long time. I couldn't stand to look at it. I hated it. I wanted nothing to do with it. I thought it was the worst piece of trash I had ever produced. Right? And then I came back to it and I realized, no, these were stories that really did need to be told and that no one else was telling them in this way. In the research that I was doing for the book, I tell 9 stories in this book. There are probably now, I'm aware of at least 30 more, all within that same framework of women that are changing their spaces from the inside.
You talk about the imposter syndrome. That is prevalent, I feel, among women. Maybe it is men too, but gosh, I don't deserve this success, or I didn't do that right. Speak to me about that.
Yeah, so personally for me, I was a young single mother, dropped out of college to have my daughter, who is phenomenally successful beyond anything I could have dreamed. But at the time, I felt like I hadn't earned where I was. And I, through a series of different corporate acquisitions and mentors and opportunities and stretch goals, was put into a job that I've kept feeling like people were going to call my bluff. I was afraid that people were going to say, you didn't give us your top talent for this job. And it was paralyzing for me. The more I talked to my clients and the more I realized that the information that I was bringing to them and the knowledge that I was sharing with them from my peers and the people that I worked with back at the home office, that's all they wanted. They didn't care where I went to school. So it really, for me, became a jump that I made intellectually, where if you're honest with people and you're doing good work, the MBA or lack of it doesn't matter as much. So,
do women have the same problems around the world, and have you had an opportunity to talk with other women on these topics?
Oh yeah, so I've been fortunate that I've traveled to 3 different continents and probably 8 different countries talking about this information. And what I've found is women in countries that we may think are less progressive as the United States, these women are so determined and so tenacious is the word for them. They want to learn as much as they can from as many people as they can. They see the work that I'm doing as somewhat aspirational for them, right? So many of them come up to me and say, I would love to be able to get on a stage and talk about the things that you talk about from my own experience. We're not there yet. But for instance, I was in Tunisia last year, a month after they elected their first female mayor of Tunis, which is their capital city. That city was alive, and the women in that country were electric. They wanted so much more, and they wanted to stay in Tunisia as opposed to coming to other countries and staying there. They know that they can help Tunisia from within. That's one example.
Do you think we need to do a better job as mothers and fathers of raising our sons?
Absolutely.
And where do we start? How do we do that?
So it's about what's the sexualization that we put on clothing choices and toy choices. I've known so many young boys who want to play with Barbies. They're curious about Barbies. They want to play act with that. There's nothing wrong with letting boys explore that. It's more detrimental, in my belief, and I'm not a psychologist or a child psychologist, but to prevent them or to teach them that there's something shameful about wanting to play with whatever toy their older sister has.
So get rid of the division.
I think as much as possible, and follow the child, right? Let the child show you what it is that interests them. You know, I grew up in a neighborhood, the guys I grew up with always laugh when I say this, but I grew up in a neighborhood where I was the only girl and the youngest, right? So I grew up around boys. I spoke the language of boys my whole life, and I played sports and followed hockey. I can talk college hoops better than anybody I know. That doesn't resonate with a lot of girls because they're not brought into that, right? And the opposite is true. Boys don't, they roll their eyes when you want to take them to see, you know, a play or something that's deemed more feminine. We shouldn't do that to our kids. Just, if they're interested, follow them. Let them show you.
As you go to speak about this book, you know, it's not going to be a straight line. It's going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
I would think that you're excited to get feedback from it and to figure out where this is going to lead you.
I have no idea. And if you had asked me 2 years ago, would I have been in Tunisia and Morocco and doing these talks and writing this book? I would not have. Maybe I would have seen the book coming, but not the book that I have in front of us today. This path has been fascinating and multi-layered and so rewarding for me.
Eileen, perhaps you'll have a global platform.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. Considering my daughter lives overseas, it would be great to have a footprint in both continents anyway.
Well, thanks for starting the conversation again, and I hope that we learn from this book and see a little bit of ourselves in it and how we can change.
Thank you so much,
Eileen
Anna.
Scully, In the Company of Men, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Spend all night kissing, and if was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked if I'm so wishing to find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Need to keep locked in the grocery store of a mind. Just to save time, skip right ahead to the last ride.